HDMI. We're talking about future world changers, leaders. And I don't know whether you're taking this thing simply because you really want to be a part of the expanding effectiveness of God's church, or whether you're just trying to grow individually and be a better leader at home or maybe on the job. Maybe you're doing this. I do pray that some of this stuff kind of transfers over to the church, but this is your book, Leadership Axioms. So I'm going to give you a little introduction today, and really my hope, man, is that you kind of pick up some of my heart on leadership, and maybe we can define maybe some of the culture, and you can pick up some of that as some of the vibes of that as I speak today. And so I'm going to do 4 things today, and on this video, and I hope to get this thing done in 30 minutes or so, 40 minutes. We'll know when it's all over because I didn't rehearse this thing. But I want you to take out a notepad and take some notes because really we're going to be building upon a culture that has really existed for the last almost 15 years of this ministry. So nonetheless, grab a notepad and I'm going to tell you some of the objectives to this video lesson today. Well, we have 4 objectives. Number 1, in this video, I want to define leadership. So I'm going to give you a working definition of leadership and kind of set that in motion. We're going to go over the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership today. It's a book written by John Maxwell, and it was the first leadership book that I grabbed a hold of that really sunk in, where I was able to put all this stuff together. And some of you guys might think, well, what kind of input did one book have on pastor? Well, I'm telling you, big. I mean, apart from the Bible, I would say probably this book, the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, has had the biggest impact on my life. And the question always arises: is a leader born or is a leader made? And I think that there are personalities that might be have a bent toward leadership, so there might be a strength for that. At the end of the day, leaders are not just born. Some may have a little more raw material to work with, personality-wise, or even intellectually and stuff of that nature. Even appearance, because physical appearance will even play a role in leadership. But regardless of all of that, at the end of the day, I do believe that leaders are made, and they're not born. So good leaders or great leaders are made. They're not born. And for me, this book, 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, is probably the most impactful resource or book, apart from the Bible, that I've ever got my hands on. And some of you guys might know, and some of you guys may not know, but I was really very fortunate. I think I had more of a natural lean toward leadership, a little raw substance toward leadership. I think personality-wise and all that stuff even when I was young. And even some of that stuff was played out in my life when I was in the Marine Corps. As a matter of fact, even in boot camp, I was what's called the company honor graduate. So in other words, I was the top graduate out of almost 900 recruits that went through boot camp, and that's not a real big deal. But the bottom, what I'm trying to say is, again, I'm not toting nothing. I'm trying to make the point about this book, The Laws of Leadership. I did have some success as a leader, and I even by the time I was 21 years old, I was meritoriously promoted to the rank of E5, which is sergeant in the Marine Corps, and I was one of the most rapid, quickly promoted sergeants meritoriously in the Marine Corps since the Vietnam War, or the end of that conflict had happened. And I taught at the Non-Commissioned Officer Academy, so it was all about leadership and that sort of stuff. And so I knew about leadership. I taught leadership in the Marine Corps. I taught leadership to leaders in the Marine Corps. But let me tell you what I knew. Nothing. It didn't matter nothing, because it was in the context of authority, and it was out of leading out of position and not out of influence. So we're going to cover those 21 irrefutable laws of leadership, which really are the bedrock to our ministry here, or to the leadership culture of our ministry. So we're going to cover those things, and I want you to think about those 21 irrefutable laws of leadership as those sort of maybe like you can imagine it to be the constitution and bylaws for governing the leadership culture within our church. So it's hard for me to add even a great book like what we're doing in this class, Leadership Axioms by Bill Hybels. It's hard for me to add any other leadership material without going back to the bedrock, a foundation for you to bounce off of. And that's what I asked my wife, Pastor Shannon, to allow me to do today. So having said that, we're going to do 4 things. We're going to define leadership. We're going to cover the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership. Number 3, we're going to introduce leadership axioms by defining what an axiom is. And then I'm going to challenge you with a class assignment. And that challenge or that assignment should be a way to give you, in other words, I want to challenge you in an approach to this course of study. So we're not just trying to add to ourselves head knowledge or anything like that, but I want you to grab the approach to the study of the leadership axioms, and twofold. Number one, my hope is that it'll help you get the most out of this class, and second of all, it'll benefit the church by strengthening you as a leader. So that's the objective of this video lesson that you're watching right now. So let's begin by defining leadership. And I want to give you one definition of leadership, and it's very complicated. So it might be, it's like a paragraph long. And I'm not telling you, you have to write really big for it to be a paragraph. Leadership is simply defined with one word and one word only. Leadership is influence. That's it. It's nothing more. It's nothing less. And leadership says, I'm going to get people to move from one place to another place. And the idea is I want to get somebody to come with me. I'm not pushing people to go somewhere or do something, but I'm taking people with me on a journey, and that's influence, and that's all that is. So all the stuff we're going to talk about when we talk about the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership today is based upon that definition. Now, as a matter of fact, the third leadership law is in the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership is the law of influence. And so I might not even have to cover that a little bit later, but I want you to know from the get-go, leadership is influence. I'll come back and visit that a little bit later as we cover the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership. Let me say this, however, because when I say these are laws, it's very important for you to grab that. And when I say laws, what I mean is that these 21 principles of leadership that John Maxwell has put in this book, or if it's a law, it means it's something that's universal. And not only is it universal, but it is timeless, meaning that there are principles here that can be applied in all areas and still produce, or all arenas of life, and still produce the same results, whether it's in the church, whether it's in the workplace, or in a classroom somewhere, or within your home, or whether it's in the United States, or if it's in India or Africa, or wherever, no matter what circumstances you're in, if it's a law, it's a timeless and a universal principle that can be applied in all arenas of life and still produce the same results. And so these are 21 laws that sort of make the bedrock of our leadership culture here. Now, there are 4 truths concerning these laws that I'm going to present to you today. So it's very important for you to grasp it. Number 1, these laws can be learned, and some are now. Here's the deal: some are easier to understand and easier to apply than others, but every one of these can be acquired. So it's not something distant that will elude your grasp. It can be learned. Number 2, I would say this: the second truth concerning the law is that these laws can stand alone. They're not interdependent upon. the other. Now, each will complement the other, but they don't need each other in order to stand alone. In other words, bottom line is, if it's a law, it stands alone. You follow me? It's not this plus that. It's one law stands alone. Number three, I'd say this. These laws carry with them consequences. So every one of these laws bear a consequence. If you apply the laws, people will follow you. That's it. And violate or ignore them, and you will not be able to lead other people. That's the consequence. And let me say this. I'd say number four, and finally, the fourth thing I want you to grab about this is that these laws are the foundation of leadership. And so meaning once you learn the principles, they're foundational. So once you learn them, you have to practice them or apply them to your life and practice them in your life, and actually practice them continually. And the more you practice them, the more you apply them, the more you swing the bat and take a shot at it, then the better you'll become at exercising these laws. Now, let me go ahead and go over these laws. I'm going to try to do this as quickly as possible. So, again, this is just an introduction. You can grab the book yourself, and I would strongly encourage you to do that. Maybe you could do it your spare time. If you want to complement what you're doing now, do that. But bottom line is, I just want to introduce those laws. So, 21 irrefutable laws of leadership. Number one is the law of the lid. The law of the lid simply says leadership ability determines a person's level of effectiveness. In other words, I would say this: if your leadership rates an 8, like on a scale from 1 to 10, you would say, and 10 being good and or the best, and you say, well, look, my leadership rates an 8, then your effectiveness as a leader will never be greater than a 7. Bottom line, that's the law of the lid. You only are capable of leading as effectively as you are as a leader. Whatever that rating is, so it is. Now, let me say this. Number two, let me go on. Sorry, I'm going to run out of time. Thank you for loving me because I'm not preaching on Sunday. You know what I mean. Number two is the law of influence. Now, what the law of influence says, the true measure of leadership is influence. And that's the working definition I gave you a little earlier of leadership. Meaning, saying this, leadership is the influence, nothing more or nothing less. And leadership is the ability to get others to move in a certain direction. Now, I want you to hear me out, because I think this is important to note that there's a difference between motivating somebody and manipulating somebody. If I'm motivating someone, I'm doing it for their own good. It's in their best interest, number one. Number two, if I'm motivating you, I'm getting you to do really what you want to do. It's already in your heart to do. Maybe you just don't lack the discipline, or maybe you don't have the discipline, you lack the discipline, or perhaps some of the drive or the energy, or maybe even the resources to do it. But the bottom line is, if I'm motivating you, I'm influencing you. But if I'm manipulating you, I'm forcing you to do something that you don't want to do. It's something that I only want you to do. Now, that's the difference between motivation and manipulation. Because listen, because you can manipulate somebody and you can get them to move, but the enemy uses that kind of influence, right? We might call that temptation, we might call that control, we might call that domination, and we can define it as all other sorts of styles of leadership, but they're not godly. Godly leadership is influence, and that is the law of influence. Influence is, our leadership is influence. It's nothing more, it's nothing less. Number three, the third law of leadership is the law of process, which says leadership develops daily and not in a day. In other words, just as we grew into our, the size shoe that we wear today, or the boots that we wear today, in the same way we grow into our shoes, we grow into our leadership potential. And our leadership potential is developed daily, ongoing. That's why I say this all the time. And you might refer to this as one of the axioms around here. All living things grow. And if you're not growing, you're dying. Another axiom around here is, and all living things change. So change is something that growth, that we celebrate because of growth. But anyways, the law of process simply says that leadership is developed daily, not in a day. And the bottom line is simply this. Leaders, my friend, are learners. We're constantly growing. And so leaders are readers, because that's why you're doing this course, so we can continue to grow. And I want to make this, I want to deliver this note to you today. Look, the greatest challenge that the leader will ever face is himself, right? So the hardest work within the leader, or the hardest person that, the most difficult person the leader will ever lead is himself. And that's the law of process. The law of process says, I'm going to continue to grow, and I'm going to lead me before I even attempt to lead anybody else. And so that means that we're ever learning today, because when we learn today, it makes for a better you, and a better you makes for a better leader, and makes for a better tomorrow, right? So we learn today so we can be a better us, or a better leader tomorrow. That is the law of process. The fourth law of process is the law of navigation. I remember when I picked up this book, man, it must have been, 14 years ago, almost 15 years ago, when I picked up this book. And it was like just an epiphany. It was like, ta-da! When I got to number 4, it was like the piece of the puzzle that I've missed my whole life, but number 4 is the law of navigation. And the law of navigation says anyone can steer a ship, but it takes a leader to chart the course. Meaning this, leaders see the whole trip and in their minds before they ever even leave the dock, they ever depart from the port, before they ever disembark. So the law of navigation says that this is not just about having a dream. This is about having a plan, and I chart how I'm going to get there. I mean, how do what's the course and how I'm going to get there? That is the law of navigation. So you can't just have a dream. This is not about the size of the project that's going to determine whether or not people are going to accept it, or the size of your vision, or the size of your heart, but really it's the size of the leader. And the leader takes that opportunity to navigate through the waters that might stop that vision from coming to pass. The law of navigation is about having a plan. I want to do this. Think about it. Think about how I'm going to get there, right? What's it going to take to get there? Number 5 is the law of intuition. And the law of intuition, I'm sorry, that's later on, is the law of E.F. Hutton. And the law of E.F. Hutton says, when the real leader speaks, people listen, right? And I know I got some young people watching this, and you guys don't even know who E.F. Hutton is. It was an investment company. But years back, almost 20 years ago, they had a great commercial that, and there'd be a lot of people talking in a restaurant, but then maybe a representative from E.F. Hutton would lean in on, in a table conversation, and he would start to talk about an investment or something like that. And as soon as he would begin to talk, the whole restaurant would go quiet, right? Well, that's the law of E.F. Hutton, because when the real leader speaks, everybody, everybody listens. For me, I've incorporated this law into my life, because every time I'm in a meeting with people, I'm always watching people's eyes. I want to see who they're looking at, and because if you're sitting in a meeting and there might be one person speaking, but while that one person's speaking, if they agree or as soon as they disagree, they look to the leader, right? So their eyes will switch. And I see that all the time, because I want to identify who's the leader when I meet new people, and that kind of thing. But That is the law of E.F. Hutton. When the leader speaks, everybody wants to know what the leader has to say, right? That's the law of E.F. Hutton. Number 6, so we covered the law of the lid, influence, process, navigation, E.F. Hutton. Number 6 is the law of solid ground. And basically, the law of solid ground simply says this: trust is the foundation of leadership. You know, I say this: trust is the foundation of any relationship. If I can't trust you, we have no relationship. And we can just add to that and say that trust is the foundation of leadership. Well, let me give you a picture, right? Let's talk about a pocket bank. I'm talking about your jean pockets or the place where you might keep a little change, you know, a little money, a little cash in your pocket. Here's how this thing works, right? Basically, because we're talking about trust. Every time I make a good decision as a leader, right, it's like depositing change of influence into my bank. So when I do something good in your life, or you recognize it's a good decision that I've made for the organization, and it's good all around, it's whatever. Then all of a sudden you make a deposit in my influence bank, or I've made a deposit in your influence bank. But every time I make a bad decision, it costs me influence, right? And so when I make a bad decision, you withdraw out of my bank of influence, so to speak. So you think less of me, and so that's that kind of law of the lid, right? I can only lead as effectively as I'm a leader. Now, when we talk about trust, we're talking about character. Now, just stop the tape right now, because you can't lead without character. The proverb says this, that a man's gifts will bring him before a king. And I believe that with all of my heart. And so, your gifts and your talents might take you in front of kings, but it's your character that keeps you before people of prominence. It keeps you in that place. And so if your character, does not rise up to the ability of your talent, sooner or later there's more damage done than good. So trust is about character, and that's about integrity. And that's why it's so important to me that when I say I'm going to do something as a leader, that I do it. And that's why I ask you as church leaders that anytime I get up in the pulpit and I say, this is what we're doing, and this is what we aim to do today, that we actually follow through and we actually do that. So, why? Because it's the foundation of leadership. Without that, I can't lead. If people don't trust me, if people don't know, and how do we, look, my kids know, when I would look at them and I'd say, you do that one more time and you're going to pay the consequence. And when they heard my voice that way, they could bank on that, right? That's the law of trust. If I'd say it, I'm gonna tear into you, I'm gonna punish you, I'm gonna ground you to my kids if you don't listen to me, and I never did it, what would happen? There would be no respect. They'd be out of control. Well, that's the law of solid ground. Trust is bred or built by character and integrity. And integrity says that when I say I'm going to do something, that I'm going to do it. And when I make a mistake and I can't do it, or I missed it, right? Then I've got to pay for that mistake with a public apology. That's the only way to get around that. I got to say, my bad, I missed it. But to dust it under the rug and act like it never happened, or maybe everybody else is going to forget about it because I forgot about it, it don't work that way. So you do that, and your influence in somebody else's life, decreases instead of increasing. So you lose influence in that pocket bank account that I talked about a little bit earlier. I hope you're following all that. Number 7, the 7th law of influence is the law of respect. And the law of respect simply says people naturally follow leaders stronger than themselves. Now, remember earlier, the first law was the law of the lid, which says that my effectiveness as a leader cannot go beyond my rating or my ability as a leader. Well, the law of respect, It's something like the law of the lid, except it says this is not the law of the lid is about me and my effectiveness. The law of respect is about my influence over somebody's life. Basically, it says simply this: if I'm a 7, my leadership's a 7, right? And then I will not follow an 8. So, or let me change that around a little bit, make it a little bit big. So, if my leadership level is rating is 4 or 5, and there's somebody under me, right, in my downline or in my ministry or my dream team, and their leadership ability is it's a 7. Listen, 7s don't follow 5s. It doesn't work, right? So that's the law of respect. And of course, there's a lot of ways that we gain respect. And there's the relationship factor. And so when people trust you, there's relationship, there's that, there's character, there's trust, and you know what? There's also competency. You got to be a competent leader. And so when you're competent, people trust you. And all of those things and other things will, and all these 21 factors, how well you can negotiate and apply these 21 irrefutable laws of leadership will determine your rating as a leader. And I hope you pick that up. So 7s don't follow 5s. That's the law of respect. Then we have the law of intuition. And the law of intuition says leaders evaluate everything from a leadership bias or with a leadership bias. And when I say that, I'm saying, this is not simply about facts and spreadsheets. Well, let me punch all the information, all the numbers into the computer, and it's going to send out, it's going to put out a probable report, and I'm just going to go with the facts. It's not about that. The law of intuition says, yes, include the facts. That's called wisdom, but it's also about instinct. So the law of intuition is facts plus instincts. And leaders are, when I say instinct, I would say this: the ability to read, because leaders are not only learners, they're readers, and they read number one, the situation. And that's intuition, right? I smell something around here. I can sense the atmosphere around here. So they got great intuition. They read the situation. Number two, they can read trends. All living things grow, so there's something trending, there's something moving, and they're aware of that. Number three, not just trends, but they read resources, what's available, and in other words, they know what cards they've been dealt, right? So they can play. We can only play the hand we've been dealt. So they read resources, and they continue to. What do I have available? And then they search resources, and they're applying resources to that. And number four, they read. The instinct is I read people, and so I know their body language. I know when you're listening and when you're not, when you're receiving and when you're not. And leaders are great readers of people. They know they can read what they can give and what they cannot give, because it's a matter of when can I push them and challenge them, and when do I need to back up and encourage them and comfort them. Leaders are great readers. That's the law of intuition. And fifthly, leaders can read themselves. And that's the mark of maturity, right? That I know me. I know my strength. I know my weaknesses. I know typically when I'm going to follow through and when I'm not. That's the law of intuition. It's not just about the facts. It's facts plus instinct, the ability to read situations, people, resources, others, and all that stuff. Law number 9 is the law of magnetism. The law of magnetism simply says who you are is who you attract. You know that old adage, that old saying, opposites attract? Not true, right? Like attracts like. And I did this little worksheet way back when. And by the way, I know that right now I'm at the 30-minute mark, so you're probably looking at least another 15 or 20, but it's a great class. I know you're loving it. So here we go. So let me keep going. But I did this this worksheet, this exercise, and when I read the law of magnetism years ago, and the question was, if I could choose my leadership team, the people on my leadership team would have these qualities. And I wrote these things down, right? I said, okay, number one, they'd have good people skills. Number two, they'd have drive, intestinal fortitude, and they'd have strong faith. They would be resilient people. Number three, they would be loyal, and they would be committed people. Number four, they would be self-starters, initiators. Number five, they would be generous people. Number six, they would be humble people. In other words, they'd be respecters of authority. They know the dynamics of spiritual authority. And they would be humble people, not arrogant, boastful, or pride. And finally, I wrote down, they would be knowledgeable and they would be resourceful. And then the exercise was that John Maxwell asked, he said, now, okay, I want you to check off each one of them. Look at your people or look at yourself, look at your people and say, the things that you're asking your people, are they in you? So, it's like a mirror. And you say, what do you want your people to look like? Well, I want them to look like this. Well, they're going to look like you. And I wrote all those things down. I said, well, most of these things, it was really, really good. But when I got to the knowledge part 15 years ago about being in ministry and resourcefulness, I couldn't check that off. I want them to be knowledgeable about ministry and resourceful. Well, shoot, I wasn't even knowledgeable and resourceful way back then. So anyway, but the other stuff, back then I had a team that had drive and strong faith. And what that's just a law of magnetism. What we are is what we attract. Then there's the law of connection. The law of connection says this: leaders touch a heart before they ask for a hand. In other words, what's in the leader's heart will always move people before what's in his mind or how much head knowledge he has. So it's passion that goes before knowledge. Always, passion will always trump knowledge. And John Maxwell, this is a quote from John Maxwell. John Maxwell said this. John Maxwell said, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that's the law of connection. I think, my own lean, when you talk about previous elections and the state of our, the political climate in Washington right now, and you say, well, we have Republicans and Democrats, and hey, listen, my lean is in principle. I believe that the Republican Party, some of the conservative principles are more accurately aligned biblically to my core value set, right? But can I tell you this? I can have all of that, but you might have the right ideas, but if people don't believe you're compassionate, and they don't believe that you have a heart for people, that you really care for people, you're not getting elected. And that's just the bottom line on that. Why? Because people don't care how much you know, and whether you're right or you're wrong, if they don't believe that you're acting out of their best interests, that you really love them, they're not moving. And of course, that, my friend, is the law of connection. Then we have number 11, the law of the inner circle. The law of the inner circle says a leader's potential is determined by those closest to them. Now, listen, I want you to know this, right? Though I want my inner circle to possess, my core leadership team to possess certain qualities, that whole law of magnetism that we just talked about, I also, at the same time, the law of the inner circle, I want to staff my weaknesses. So this is kind of twofold, and it's not just one way in that thing. There are two dynamics that are in operation here, right? So I want my inner circle to be filled with 4 types of people. Number one, I want them to be self-starters. I want them to add a positive value. Number 2, I want them to add or potential value. That means that they're self-starters. Number 2, I want them to add a positive value, which means that they are motivators. right? I want people that's going to be faith people, right? I want to be surrounded by people of faith. Not critical people, but problem solvers, man. Faith people. Number 3, I want them to add personal value in my inner circle. In other words, I want good friends. I want people that are going to protect me, that are going to be armor bearers. I want them, number 4, to add production value. In other words, I want people, leaders who are going to raise up other leaders. And so they know how to choose talent and how to recruit talent, for the glory and the kingdom of God. And then I want, number 5, proven value to be added to my inner circle. And I do that by finding those who will raise up other people who will raise up other people. In other words, they live by the law of multiplication. My life goal is to multiply, right? Number 12, the law of empowerment says only secure leaders give power to others. In other words, we're not scared to delegate and give people a chance to fail. And I should say that we're not scared of failure, and because there's a difference between delegating and empowering. And I need to hit that. But the bottom line is only a secure leader will give power or empower other people, and that's about letting them know everything you know. And I make this covenant with my team, my inner circles, all the time. Anything, any treasure that God's dropped in my heart, anything that God's given me, I'm going to give to you, right? Why? Because it comes from the kingdom anyway. This is community property. It's heaven property. And anything God gives me, I'm going to give you. I'm not going to hold secrets from you, secrets to success. I'm going to give it away. So empowering people is more than about delegating. It's about resourcing them. It's about inspiring them. It's about improving them. It's about supervising them to coach them up on their best game. And I want you to know that I believe that the key to empowerment, empowering people, is simply to believe in them. You keep on believing in them enough, to correct them and whatnot. Now look. You can take the horse to water, but you can't make them drink, right? So you can't force anybody to continue to learn from you. You can't do that, right? And I'm not going to knock anybody's door down. I'm not going to yell. I don't want to raise my voice and demand that people listen to me. I'm not going to cast my pearl before swine. In other words, meaning not that people are pigs, but people that don't respect the treasure that I'm giving them when I'm pouring into their life. I understand all that. But at the end of the day, is the greatest key, the greatest asset is that I'm going to believe in people. Let me go on. Number 13 is the law of reproduction. And the law of reproduction says it takes a leader to raise up a leader. And my motto around here is that my axiom is that we never do ministry alone. Never. I don't eat alone, and I won't do ministry because everybody's got to eat. It's an opportunity for ministry. And I seize that every opportunity. I don't go and turn off the lights in the church without teaching somebody else how to turn those lights on. And anybody that's been around my inner circle, you know that, right? That's the law of reproduction. And the key to reproduction is mentorship. That means I'm going to take you under my shadow, and we're going to do this thing together. And the law of mentorship says, before I'm going to teach anybody to do anything, I got to be willing to do it. So I do it, then I do it, and you watch me do it. Then you do it, and I watch you do it, and then you do it. That is the law of reproduction, right? Number 14 is the law of buy-in. And the law of buy-in says people buy into the leader, and then they buy into the vision. And so the bottom line is simply, you cannot sell what you do not own. And if you don't own the vision, you can't sell the vision. And because people won't believe what you're saying is authentic, right? So, but at the end of the day, before people buy into a leader's vision, they got to buy into the leader. And here's how this works: the leader finds the dream, and then the people find the leader, and just the opposite takes place. The people find the leader, and then they follow the dream, and that's the law of buy-in, right? Number 15 is the law of victory, and the law of victory says leaders find a way for the team to win. We're always trying to come up with a victory, right? And basically, around here, failure is just not an option. We're going to succeed. There ain't no quitting. we're going to succeed. And even if we have to adjust the goal or adapt and overcome by reestablishing a strategy or redefining success or something of that nature. But the bottom line is the law of victory says failure is not an option. And let me tell you something about leaders. Crisis brings out the best in a leader, period. And when the pressure's on, that's when they perform. That's when they step up to the bat. And that is the law of victory. Number 16 is the law of the big mo. When we talk about big mo, we're talking about momentum. And of course, it's football season, so you watch that all the time on television. The team that has the momentum is usually the team that's going to win, right? The one that maintains momentum for the majority of the game. And the law of the big mo simply says momentum is a leader's best friend. And the bottom line is it takes more energy for liftoff, like the space shuttle or any kind of rocket launching a satellite into space. It takes more energy for liftoff than to actually propel that rocket in orbit. And that's about momentum. And leaders, that's what leaders do. Leaders create momentum. And if I forgot who said this, but somebody said, I forgot the quote. But if you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen. Well, for leaders, the law of the big mo, creating momentum, simply says this: if you can't create some heat, you need to get out of leadership. Right? You know what I mean? So there's got to be some passion, and there's got to be some energy behind you. I mean, because leadership is about blowing at people's cells. I just got excited like that. Look at that. So it's about blowing at people's cells. And that's the law of the big mo. And that's why I'm always cautioning our church about taking vacations. All right, let's take a break. And, or what happens? Then the momentum downshifts. But the leader, he can't do that. Right? And maybe other people got to take a break, but you can't. You're still on your A game. And if you're taking breaks, you better make sure something else is going, because you don't want momentum to come to a halt, and then you got to take all of this energy to relaunch another initiative, right? That's the law of the big mo. Number 17 is the law of priorities. And the law of priority says leaders understand that activity is not necessarily accomplishment. Here are the three laws of priority. In other words, the law of priority simply says, man, I got to put my best energy in what's going to bring about the best results and the biggest returns, right? That's the law of priority. And I only got so much time in a day. I've only got so much resources that I can contribute to a project. At the end of the day, I've got to determine, number one, what's required. Right? What's the biggest requirement right now? What's pressing? What's burning? And what's the biggest requirement? Number two, I got to say, what is my energy? When I give my energy to this thing or that day, the priority today, what's going to bring about the greatest return? In other words, biggest effort, or even the smallest effort, to bring about the biggest return for the organization. And then, number three, there's the greatest reward, which simply says, look, man, I'm going to do those things that I'm passionate about. And so the greatest reward, what's most rewarding for me, right? So I got to prioritize things. What's required? What's going to bring about? What's I got to do this right now. There's a fire burning. If I don't put out the fire, it's going to burn down the building. So I got to go take care of that, right? But there's not only that, there's the law of return. So I got to be putting energy in what's going to bring about the greatest return. And then lastly, what's the greatest reward that I'm going to receive? And at the end of the day, rewards are important, because what I enjoy is what I'm going to put my most energy into. That's how you sort of evaluate your priorities. Number 18 is the law of sacrifice, which says a leader must give up to go up. Now, be it that you're swallowing your pride, or you're giving up your pride by swallowing your pride, or maybe you're sacrificing your time, your talent, or your treasure. The bottom line is, this is the law of sacrifice. That means simply that leaders must continually sacrifice of themselves, be it pride, time, energy, talent, treasure, whatever it is, but we have to continue to pay that price. What's the cost of leadership? Bottom line is, if I'm going to increase as a leader, then as my leadership increases, so do my responsibilities. And as my responsibilities increase, that means that my rights decrease. I'll give you an example, right? I do not believe that a social drink, or I shouldn't say social drink, but one glass of wine is a sin, and it's going to send somebody to hell. But as a leader, I've given up that right, that freedom to drink casually. I'm not going to do it. And so that's why, like around here, we tell all of our leaders that these gray areas, biblical areas, bro, you have to be discreet in how you do it. So you don't go out publicly drinking. So it was one drink. We don't do that, right? Why? Because of the law of sacrifice. And leadership means setting the example. And that's the law of sacrifice, right? Number 19 is the law of timing. And the law of timing says tells us when to lead is just as important as what to do and where to go. So not just about the law of navigation, right? But we talk about timing, when to do it. And I've preached this a long time ago, and I said, man, you might be saying the right thing, but if you're saying it at the wrong time, it's the wrong thing. And you might be saying the right thing, but if it's in the wrong spirit, it's the wrong thing. And the same thing applies with the law of timing here. And the law of timing says timing is everything. And let me spell this out for you, right? So the wrong action, leadership action, at the wrong time equals disaster. The right action at the right time equals resistance. The right action at the wrong time equals resistance from the people that you're trying to lead. Then the wrong action at the right time, well, that's just a mistake, right? I just missed it, right? And then lastly, the right action at the right time equals success. Number 20, the law of explosive growth. And the law of explosive growth says to add growth, lead followers. To multiply, you gotta lead leaders. And basically, and there's a difference between this, right? Because that's the difference between being a manager and a leader. And I could talk about all that stuff, but I'm already at 47 minutes, and so now I should have said it. I lied to you. I've broken trust. I might as well go ahead and cut this thing off. It's an hour video, okay? So let me give you this, right? So leaders who develop, and let me tell you the difference between the leaders who develop followers and the leaders who develop leaders. And we're in the business of developing leaders. It's a core value of this ministry, right? So the leader who develops followers, right? They need to be needed. But a leader who develops leaders wants to be succeeded. In other words, I want somebody to follow me. The leader who develops followers focuses on weaknesses. The one who develops leaders focuses on strengths. The leader who develops followers develops the bottom 20% of the pool. The leader who develops leaders focuses his energy on the top 20%. The developed followers, well, you treat people the same for fairness sake. But developed leaders, it's not like that, right? I'm going to treat leaders as individuals for impact. So there are concessions that are made. There is more time invested in a leader's life. So, those leaders that have lots of potential and are putting out, then I'm spending more time and I'm making more investment. Does that make sense, right? Because I want leaders develop leaders. Let me go on. Leaders who develop followers hoard power. Develop leaders and you give power away. Develop followers and you spend time with others. Develop leaders, you invest time in other people. And I could go on and tell you some more. But that's the difference between, to kind of define the idea of the law of explosive growth. We don't want to just add followers. We want to multiply. And that means that we got to add leaders to our organization, right? And that's what success, as defined by me here around our church. Then number 21, we're done, and I'll wrap this thing up, is the law of legacy. And the law of legacy says a leader's lasting value is measured by his succession. In other words, who follows me? I say this all the time. Without a successor, someone to take my place, there is no success for me. I don't care how many speaking engagements or how much money I got, there is no success, right? Look, here's my job personally, inwardly, right? My job description, the job description for myself is that I want to work myself out of a job. My job is that there are people better equipped to pastor this church than I am. That's when I've succeeded. That's when I've said, Lord, now it's time for me to step back, right? That is the law of legacy, right? And leaders that are going to develop, that operate in this law of legacy say, I'm going to lead 20 years ahead. I'm not thinking right now. I'm thinking 20 years ahead. And that means that I'm going to pay the price today so that I can have success tomorrow. That is the law of legacy. I tell my kids all the time, I said, listen, you one or two choices. You either pay now, you either play now and pay later, or you pay now and you can pay later. It's really, the choice is yours. Now, honestly, we come to a close here, and I'm going to wrap this whole thing up. I really wanted to cover the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership, but let me wrap this thing up for you, because I told you we had 4 objectives here, and number 4 is where am I at? Right there. Sorry. Number 3 and 4 is to introduce leadership axioms by defining an axiom, and then give you that challenge, right? Let me tell you about the axioms, because there's a difference between the law, right, and the axiom. So there's a difference. The law, the axiom. The law is the foundation. The axiom, an axiom is a precept, or axioms would be these little guidelines or rules that we follow that fit into the laws, all right? So they'll be like the bylaws of the Constitution, the laws, right? And so an axiom, or those little adages or little sayings that capture a truth or a principle. So these are adages or sayings that capture these laws. You follow me? The foundation, little easy sayings that capture these laws, a precept. And so I would say this, number 3, an axiom is a personal ministry motto that captures and defines or describes the culture and the core values of a leadership and its organization. So that's an axiom. And here's the challenge and for the approach that I want you to take for this study. It's threefold. My challenge to you is that as you go through this whole lesson plan and you read through this book and you look at those axioms, I've got a threefold challenge. Number 1, that you would attempt to identify, I want you to identify as many hope alive axioms while you look at those axioms that Bill Hybel has captured in his ministry. I want you to identify some axioms that those adages or sayings or mottos of hope alive, and I also want you to identify those. So let me give you an example. One of Bill Hybel's axioms is the big ask, A-S-K, right? Not the big ask me a question. Okay, so for those of you that aren't thinking nice right now, well, for us, there's an axiom here that captures that axiom. For us, we call it the shoulder slap, right? It's not about what I announce on Sunday. Sometimes you got to sit personally with someone and make a personal appeal and ask the big question. And of course, the big ask sort of outlines that, and it's really, really cool. But, we call it the shoulder slap. In the big ask, he talks about the approach to asking that, those questions? Well, for us, I have an adage. It's called the sandwich. So we encourage the sandwich of confrontation. We encourage, then we bring the meat, what we're asking, and then we close with something sweet again. So it's sweet, bitter, sweet, right? That's how that thing works. An axiom. So I'm wanting, as you read through these axioms, I want you to think about some of the axioms of leadership right here in the ministry. And I want you, it's a homework assignment. I want you to make a little side note. Hey, pastor says this, right? All living things grow, those sorts of things. And you have to use more than the ones I just quoted in this video. Number two, my second challenge is that you would seek to place each of these 21 axioms, these 72, 74 axioms that Bill Hybels have, that you would take each of these axioms and place them, place them in one of the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership. Like, where would this axiom fit in the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership? I want you to think about that as you go through each one of the axioms. And last of all is that the last challenge, number three, is that you would identify at least 3 of these axioms that if you applied these things to your life or to your ministry, it would make the biggest improvement in your ability to influence people. So that's your 3 assignments, right? And so I want you to make it personal. I want you to apply this to your life. And look, I want to tell you, I'm proud of you. I'm so happy that you're making a commitment, man, to grow as a leader. And I think you'll be better for it. I think your family will be better for it. Your pocketbook should be better for it, right? Because leaders get promoted, right, in business. And the kingdom of God will be better for it. Let me pray for you right now. Heavenly Father, I ask you, in the name of Jesus, there was no greater leader than your son, Christ. And I'm asking, God, let that same anointing of leadership to gather the multitudes, yet disciple and send out and multiply the disciples, God. Let that rest upon everyone that's seeking you right now via this study. Lord, I pray it that the mind of Christ, God, would quicken their understanding, that this stuff is easy, it's simple, because it's a heavenly truth. And God, give them the courage to apply it. And let the spotlight of truth, God, sweep over our hearts, that we can identify the strengths in our life and those things that we need to improve in our life, that, Lord, in the end, we'll just be better and greater, more effective witnesses of the gospel of Jesus Christ and your Son, in whose name we now pray. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. God bless you. I pray you enjoy this whole course.